Let's start with the layout of a newspaper article. First, there's a heading, which tells us what the article is about. This is a very important part of the whole article because after reading the heading, the reader decides to continue reading or to stop. In order to attract the reader's attention, the so-called eye-catching effect is used. This means that big and bold fonts are used, and also very concrete and specific vocabulary. What is interesting about headings is the fact that there are only very few verbs and no articles, the, or an. Another point is that very often shorter forms of some longer words are used. For example, instead of the word executives, you see execs. And also abbreviations are commonly used. The EU instead of the European Union, or NATO instead of North Atlantic Treaty Organization. What's also typical of headings is the use of alliteration, which is the repetition of the same sound at the beginning of a few words. Road rage at Rancorn Rally. Quite often, there's also a subheading. This adds information to the heading and further influences the reader's decision to read or not to read the article. And then there's the so-called body, which means the text itself. Let's discuss the body in more detail. The body starts with the so-called head paragraph, where you can find the most important information from the whole article summed up in a few sentences. In the text after the head paragraph, you find more details, background information, and other additional information. The whole body is divided into paragraphs, which make it easier to read. They give the text a structure. Also here you can sometimes find subheadings. They make the reader interested in what's in the next paragraph. In many factual texts, paragraphs start with a topic sentence. This is the first sentence of the paragraph, which states very specifically what the paragraph is going to be about. Let's revise what we've just learned. Here's one possible example of a newspaper layout. On the very first page at the top is the title. For example, a newspaper that is called Daily Paper. This is usually the biggest font of the whole paper. Then there are a number of articles. Each article has a heading and usually also a subheading. Most articles are accompanied by a photograph or some other illustration. The description below the picture is called caption. Articles consist of paragraphs and they're structured into columns. The main text of the article is called the body. Good, let's move on. There are, of course, many kinds of newspapers. The same topics are presented differently in different newspapers. The way they are presented is always adapted to the people that read them and their interests and opinions. There are two big groups into which we can divide newspapers. Number one, quality press, also called quality papers. And number two, popular press, which is also known under the following terms: popular papers, tabloids, sensational papers, or yellow press. When people talk about newspapers, they often use these two words, broadsheet and tabloid. Broadsheet stands for the more serious kind, the one we just called a quality paper. And tabloid refers to the popular, sensational kind of newspaper. However, both types of newspaper have some things in common. The topics in both can be found in the following categories: current affairs, general news, hot news, national, home, domestic, international, Serious topics that include education, economy, finance, politics, social issues, arts, sports. And entertainment topics, cartoons or jokes, human interest stories, stars, gossip, crossword puzzle, television listings. Okay, and one last thing before you go. If you're asked to describe the author's or the text's attitude towards the topic, there are some words that you should know. In a positive way, we could mention words such as in-depth, thought-provoking, controversial, entertaining, reliable, comprehensive, impressive, promising, objective, creative, or critical. And the negative ones are, for example, prejudiced or biased, subjective, stereotyped, unreliable, sensationalistic, gossipy, limited, or offensive.